Good afternoon and welcome. You are right on time for the Senate live proceedings. This being a Tuesday afternoon sitting of the House on the 27th day of February, the year being 2024. We are so glad you're watching. And remember, this live broadcast is brought to you by the national broadcaster KBC in conjunction with the parliamentary broadcasting units. Allow me to take you through the highlights in the order of business as you await for the appointed time, 2:30, when the House officially commences business. This afternoon, senators are set to resume a debate on the Water Amendment Bill. This is National Assembly Bills number 33 of the year 2023. This particular bill is by the Senate Majority Leader. The Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 37 of the year 2023 by the Senator Godfrey Ososi, is equally another bill that senators are set to resume debate on this afternoon. After completion of the allocated time, the House will proceed to a vote, popularly known as a division, on various amendments in the Powers and Privileges Bill. And in a nutshell, this amendment bill is a bill seeking to give our Senate more powers in regards to its oversight role of counties. The chairperson, Select Committee on Matters County Public Investment and Special Funds, will be moving a motion. This motion pertains the report of Select Committee on the County Public Investment and Special Funds on the non-remittance of pension deductions to the pension schemes by the county government. That the Senate adopt the report of the Select Committee on the County Public Investment and Special Funds on matters non-remittance of pension deductions and these deductions are supposed to be forwarded to the pension schemes by the county government. This committee laid its report on the table of the Senate on the 14th day of Wednesday, February 2024. The Public Service Values and Principles Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 46 of the year 2022, is another bill that senators are set to resume debate on this afternoon. This a particular amendment bill on matters public service, values and principles is a bill by the Senator for Nandi County, Senator Samson Cherargei. Equally, this afternoon, the House will be considering the County Boundaries Bill. This is Senate Bills number 6 of the year 2023 by the Senator for Homa Bay County, Senator Moses Kajwang. Person to standing orders of the House, standing orders number 53, subsection 1. A number of senators will be seeking statements from various standing committees of the House. Given priority is the Senator for Muranga County, Senator Joe Nyoto, will be seeking a statement from the Standing Committee on Matters Health regarding the state of medical equipment supplied by Megascope to level 5 hospitals across the country. The Senator for Marsabit County, Senator Mohamed Chute, will be seeking a statement from the Standing Committee on Matters Labor and Social Welfare concerning the non-remittance of the National Health Insurance Fund, popularly known as NHIF deductions, and the delayed payment of salaries by the county government of Marsabit County. The Great Senator for Taita Taveta County, Senator Jones Maruma, will be seeking a statement from the Standing Committee on Matters Land, Environment and Natural Resources regarding the land boundary dispute between residents of Marungu Village and Oza Group Ranch in Taita Taveta County. And finally, understanding orders number 53, subsection 1, The Senator for Kisumu County, Honorable Senator Professor Ujenda, will be seeking a statement from the Standing Committee on Matters Education. The statement which the Senator for Kisumu seeks regards the payment of hardship allowances to teachers in flood-prone Nyando sub-county in Kisumu County. This afternoon, we expect a total number of 37 reports from the Auditor General to be tabled before the floor of the Senate this afternoon. This report is in regards to how various county governments utilized monies allocated to them for various departments within the counties for the year ended June 30th, 2023. We equally expect a report to Parliament on all new loans contracted by the Government of Kenya as from the 1st of September 2023 up to the 31st of January 2024. Remember, you can follow up on this live broadcast courtesy of our YouTube channels, that is on Senate of Kenya, as well as on KBC Channel 1 on YouTube. And equally, you can watch this live broadcast courtesy of our Signet channel, that is Senate TV on Signet. The report of the Select Committee on the County Public Investment and Special Funds on its consideration of the audit reports of water services providers is another report set to be considered this afternoon. The business of the Senate is just about to commence. The Speaker, Honorable Amason Kingi, is presiding over the business of the House this afternoon. Allow me to hand you over. My name is Gladys Mungai.
Na tuombe. Mwenyezi Mungu, twakusihi ututazame kwa neema nyingi na baraka sisi watumishi wako ambao umeridhika kutuita kwa nyadhifa za uongozi katika jamhuri yetu. Twakuomba utuajalie tuyatende na kuyafikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi hii yetu na wale ambao haja zao umezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Amen. Clerk, do we have quorum? Sergeant at Arms, kindly ring the quorum bell for 10 minutes.
The Speaker, Honorable Amason Kingi, currently presiding over the business of the Senate this afternoon, has directed the Sergeant at Arms to ring the quorum bell for 10 minutes. And this is to give senators who are yet to make their way into the chamber this afternoon some sort of a breather to do exactly that. And as we await for that quorum to be achieved for the House to commence business this afternoon, allow me to take you through the order paper this afternoon on the business for consideration by senators this afternoon. Remember, according to the standing orders of the House, at least 15 senators ought to be in the House at any particular time when the House is sitting. This afternoon, senators are set to consider the motion by the chairperson on matters a committee on public investments and special funds. This particular motion is in regards to the report of the select committee on the county public investment and special funds on its consideration of the audit report for the water service providers for the year ended June 30th, 2019, 30th June 2020, and 30th June 2021. Various agencies documented in this report include the Amatsi Water Services Company in Vihiga County, Bomet Water Company Limited in Bomet County, Gusii Water and Sanitation Company in Kisii and Nyamira counties, as well as Kisumu Water and Sanitation Company Limited, Kwale Water and Nyeri Water and Sanitation Services.
At the times, kindly stop the bell. We have quorum now. Clerk, proceed to call the first order, please.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Honorable Senators, I take this opportunity to inform you that the Senate Business Committee has convened a one-day non-residential retreat for all honorable senators. The retreat will be a follow-up of the 2 induction retreats that were held at the commencement of the 4th Senate in October and November 2022. The objectives of this one-day retreat are as follows. 1, reflect on the performance and output of the Senate during the first and second sessions of the 13th Parliament, both in plenary and committees, and identify opportunities and best practices for service delivery. 2, identify challenges that have hindered the effective discharge of the mandate of the Senate as contemplated under Article 96 of the Constitution. 3, receive updates and deliberate on welfare matters, including the administrative aspects relating to facilitation of senators and the county offices, operation of the Senate Oversight Fund, and the medical cover for senators. 4, strengthen teamwork, collegiality among senators in the discharge of their work. And lastly, align on the priority agenda for the Senate during the 3rd and subsequent sessions of the 13th Parliament. Now, honorable senators, I therefore invite you to this retreat, which will be held on Monday, 4th March of 2024 at the Ajat Grand Hotel in Nairobi City County from 8:30 a.m. The program and any other information pertaining to the event will be circulated to all honorable senators through the office of the clerk. I urge all senators to purpose to attend and participate at this very important event. Consequently, therefore, all select committees' activities scheduled for Monday, 4th of March 2024 are hereby suspended. I thank you. Next order, clerk.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the Senate today, Tuesday, the 27th of February, 2024. This is report to Parliament on all new loans contracted by Government of Kenya from 1st of September 2023 to 31st of January 2024. Report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the County Executive of the following counties: Kilifi County, County Executive of the Kilifi County for the year ended 30th June 2023, County Assembly of Kilifi for the year ended 30th June 2023, County Government of Kilifi the County Revenue Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. County Government of Kilifi, receiver of revenue, revenue statements for the year ended 30th June 2023. Kilifi County Ward Scholarship Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. County Executive of Nyeri for the year ended 30th June 2023. The County Assembly of Nyeri for the year ended 30th June 2023. Financial statements for the County Government of Nyeri for the Revenue Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Receiver of Revenue for the year ended 30th June 2023, County Government of Nyeri. Number 10, Nyeri County Health Services Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Nyeri County Executive Car Loan and Mortgage Staff Scheme Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Nyeri County Elimu Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Nyeri County Enterprise Development Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. County Assembly of Nyeri, County Assembly of Nyeri Car Loan and Mortgage Staff Scheme Pension Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the County Executive of Muranga for the year ended 30th June 2023. County Assembly of Muranga for the year ended 30th June 2023. The Muranga County Agricultural Farm Input Subsidy and Incentive Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. The County Government of Muranga County Revenue Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Muranga County Education Scholarship Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. County Executive of Nyandarua for the year ended 30th June 2023. County Assembly of Nyandarua for the year ended 30th June 2023. County Government of Nyandarua Receiver of Revenue for the year ended 30th June 2023. Kirinyaga County Emergency Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Kirinyaga County Executive Staff Car Loan Scheme Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Kirinyaga County Executive Staff Mortgage Scheme Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Kirinyaga County Alcoholic Drinks and Substance Abuse Control Fund for the year ended 30th June 2023. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Statements pursuant to Standing Order 53-1. The Honorable Senator for Muranga County, Senator Joe Newt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health regarding the current state of medical equipment supplied by Megascope to level 5 hospitals across the country, specifically CT scan and X-ray machines. In the statement, Mr. Speaker, the committee should, 1, clarify the reasons behind the machines breakdown and the current state of disrepair. 2, outline the government's action plan to address the breakdown of these critical diagnostic equipment, which are severely hampered healthcare services. 3, state the immediate measures being taken to expedite the repair of these medical equipment and ensure they are operational as soon as possible. And 4, outline plans and interventions by the State Department for Medical Services to ensure that such incidents affecting service delivery in hospitals do not reoccur. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Senator for Marsabit County, Senator Mohammed Chute. That statement is dropped. The Honorable Senator for Taita Taveta County, Senator Mwaruma. That statement is dropped. The Honorable Senator for Kisumu County, Senator Prof. Tom Ojenda. That statement is dropped. Senator Fatuma Dulo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I raise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek statement from the Standing Committee on Health concerning the operational state of the Isiolo County Referral Hospital morgue. In the statement, the committee should explain the immediate action that the county is taking to resolve the ongoing crisis at Isiolo morgue, where during the last 1 year, 4 machines have broken down, leaving 32 bodies unrefrigerated and causing a severe health hazard. 2, explain why the morgue has not been operational for the past year, despite Isiolo County Health Department receiving the highest budget allocation. Number 3, outline steps, if any, that the county is taking to ensure the facility's efficiency and capacity is improved. Finally, recommend the immediate closure of the facility as the county seeks a lasting solution to the changes facing the morgue. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable senators. At this juncture, allow me to rearrange the sequence of today's order paper so that we deal with the motions. We have 3 motions, starting with the one under order 11. Clerk, proceed to call that particular order, please.
Order number 11, motion, report of the Standing Committee on Energy on the inquiry into the high cost of electricity in the country.
Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the energy committee in the Senate undertook an inquiry whereby we explored and looked at the distribution, the generation, and the consumption of electricity in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, according to the Kenya Bureau of Standards and Economic Survey of 2023, about 87.5% of all electricity generated in this country is from renewable source. Indeed, a very, very good performance in comparison with other countries, especially in the wake of economic climate change and the need to align the goals of renewable energies with the consumption. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee did look into the arrangements of private, public, or rather the independent power generation in the country. We realized that KenGen, being one of the producers of electricity, generates about 70% of the energy that we consume, whereas the private power producers produce about 30%. However, on the cost, the 30% takes about 70% of the cost that we pay. The reason being that most of these independent power producers were conceived at a time that the country needed to bridge the gap between the demand and the supply. This, in most cases, Mr. Speaker, sir, it was done to the disadvantage of the consumers with an arrangement that is famously known as the take-all-pay. This, Mr. Speaker, sir, leaves us at a totally disadvantaged position because whether we have, they generate, whether we consume, we still end up paying. Mr. Speaker, sir, the country has made big strides in terms of generation. It has also made big strides in terms of exploring the possibility of using renewable energy. But the infrastructure that have been put in place has not been in alignment with the development so that the distribution is not evenly done in all parts of the country. As a result, the committee found it good to recommend establishment of several distribution lines, especially from the wheat generation in Marsabit all the way down to Suswa. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, we also came to realize that we lack redundant power lines. Therefore, as has been witnessed in the last few months, blackouts that have been lasting at times up to 24 hours have been witnessed in the country. This, Mr. Speaker, sir, can be solved if the government invests in multiple distribution lines so that power can be dispatched. Again, over-reliance on one substation in Susa, Mr. Speaker, has become a major impediment in this country. As a result, we need to relook at the distribution of power, and most importantly, that is why the committee recommended that Kenya Kentraco and Kenya Power must be disengaged so that one will have the responsibility of supplying power while the other one will have the responsibility of having the administrative control. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee also did look at the existing independent power producers' licenses and the possibility of them negotiating so that they can reduce the cost of power. However, we realize that some of these agreements have been cast on stone. They cannot be changed, therefore disadvantaging the consumers. As a result, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee found it fit to encourage the government to get into other new arrangements whereby we can look at especially those who are using diesel to generate power. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know that the Kenya Kwanza government has undertaken to increase the housing in the arrangement of affordable housing. This will also mean that there will be increased demand for power. Therefore, it is imperative that we also look at the effect of lack of supply, because if we have the challenges that we are having today, and again also looking at the county integrated processing pacts that are part of the agenda of the Kenya Kwanza government, we know that the demand for power is going to rise, and therefore it is also imperative that we look at also the generation, the distribution, and most importantly, the reliability of power. For us to not to find out as ourselves where some countries in this part of the world are, where power becomes very, very unreliable. We must look at the power that we are using, and that is the reason why the committee on Thursday this week will be going to Kilifi so that we can look at the possibility of having modern power technology like the nuclear energy. Mr. Speaker, sir, if we do not address the issue of power today, it is important to note that we cannot be able to achieve most of the sustainable development goals because industrialization, affordable housing, and also improved supply of power will mean that we have to have an alternative cheap source of power that is not only that is reliable and most importantly also environmentally clean. Mr. Speaker, sir, we also realize that most of the power purchase agreements were generated at a time that the country was in a very vulnerable situation, and therefore the suppliers had the advantage over the consumers. This is a situation that we need to relook at, Mr. Speaker, sir, and to be able to provide Kenyans with cheap power. We have resorted into importing powers from neighboring countries like Ethiopia, like Uganda. But moving forward, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also important that we develop our own strategic sources of power. And the committee realized that geothermal has a very, very good potential. Out of the 3,800 megawatts that we consume, we realize that geothermal can give us up to 10,000 megawatts. Currently, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are only getting like 30% from the power that we produce from geothermal. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have laws that were also put in place several decades ago, especially for the diesel-generated power, whereby we also realize that the requirement that we have a reserve of heavy oils by these producers is very punitive, and because the cost of diesel is a pass-through cost, it makes the power become a very, very expensive undertaking in this country. For us to be able to make it affordable, Mr. Speaker, sir, we must start looking at the possibility of retiring some of the thermal plants so that we can not only give Kenyans green energy, but also affordable. It is quite interesting, Mr. Speaker, sir, to note that the cost of nuclear-generated power goes to about $2 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas the diesel-generated goes to about 20 times as high as that. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee also did look at the management and the accountability, transparency, and the governance of most of the state departments that are responsible for distribution and generation of power. We realize that there is need to start looking at how the procurement of these institutions is undertaking, but most importantly, Mr. Speaker, sir, we realize that it's also imperative for us to be able to put systems in place so that we can increase the transparency and accountability. This, Mr. Speaker, sir, was also seen as one of the major impediments of the cost of power because we lose a lot of money through transmission losses, through forex adjustments, and most of these, Mr. Speaker, sir, are things that can be associated with accountability and governance issues. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee also looked at the companies that have been mandated to supply power. And we realized that some of these contracts, Mr. Speaker, sir, they were very skewed towards the producers of power, most of them 20 years long, and we realized that there is need, Mr. Speaker, moving forward to look at how we moderate the power purchase agreements between the private sector and the government sector, and mostly owing to the fact that these costs can be avoided if done in the right way. Mr. Speaker, sir, finally, the committee also agreed that it is important for us to be able to mitigate the losses, the 26% transmission losses. The international best practice, Mr. Speaker, goes to about 9%. In this country, we have 26% without doing anything, Mr. Speaker. If we are able to mitigate these transmission losses, we could be able to bring down the cost of power by about 10%. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are some of the things that we can be able to get. These are the low-lying hanging fruits that we can be able to realize within a short time. Mr. Speaker, sir, as a wind-up, I'll call my colleague in the committee, Senator Shute, to second. Oh, Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Speaker, I want to actually second the motion, the report I mean. Honorable Speaker, as the chairman has said, I think the committee has done a lot of work in the sector, and there has been a lot of problems in a lot of illegal connections, and this has actually caused us a lot of problems. And as you're aware, as you said, 87% of this country is actually corrected. But of course, it's mostly some part of the country, like my place, Wajir and Marsabit and all those places in northern Kenya, is actually using generators, which is very expensive, given distributions and a lot of inconveniences. And as a result, I think we requested the Ministry of Energy to do corrections to those places to cut cost, a lot of, especially using the green energy. Honorable Speaker, what we have found is that the transmission of power is actually very costly to this country because of wildlife problems. Actually, the line transmits through various areas, various and many counties. There are extra charges that have been made on the transmission lines that actually increases the cost of production. There are many people actually who wants to make money out of it, and therefore, as a contractor, actually is faced with a lot of challenges, and it takes too long to connect some places. Actually, the line that comes from all the way from Turkana Windmill up to Naivasha, Susu area, has taken time and has actually delayed because of interventions from the various settlements and towns where the line is transmitted through. And as a result, there has been a lot of money that has been paid, and that has caused delay. Honorable Speaker, one other thing we have seen a challenge is that the meters, the power meters that actually has always been having a problem. The suppliers of the meters delay. There was a lot of payment that has been the many meters that was paid for, but it has not been delivered.
Senator Gloria, can you take your seat, please? Proceed.
One other thing, Honorable Speaker, what the committee found was that actually the private BPI guys, the private suppliers, power suppliers, is actually costing this country a lot of money. The agreement has already been signed for all 30 years, 20 years, and there's no way we can withdraw. You will see as an instance where the power is not consumed to fully, but still the power lighting guys are paying for the money for the power. But the power, something like the Kengen, what they say they cannot store it, like the windmills, energy from the windmill cannot be stored. So it is either you use it or leave it, and then you have to pay for it. I think this has actually costed this country a lot of money, and a lot of there must be something to be done, and it needs something to be done actually in very serious issues. Generally, by Honorable Speaker, the cost of power in this country actually has been made expensive because of various overhead costs, and this is why today this country is in 2030. This country is supposed to be industrialized. We need to have many industries for productions, but because of the cost of power, most of the multinational companies are leaving this country, and therefore it's a high time that we need to improve on our power production. With those few remarks, I beg to support the motion. I beg to second the motion. Thank you. The report, yeah.
Honorable Senators, I now proceed to propose the question, which is that the Senate adopts the report by the Standing Committee on Energy on the inquiry into the high cost of electricity in the country laid on the table of the Senate today, Wednesday, 27th of September, 2023. The Honorable Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, from the report, the intent is very heavy, and the cost of living is also affected by cost of power, because cost of power goes into manufacturing and goes into many other things. Mr. Speaker, in Kenya, and especially with the recent rains, we highly rely on the production of power from the rivers mainly, and with excess rain, you expect cost of power to go down. We also have the proposed Grad I Force Dam, which will be between Tharaka County and Kitui County on Tana River, which could go a long way to save the country, you know, from high cost of electricity in future. We also have Thwake Dam in Makueni, which is now 90% completion, and unfortunately has delayed due to low funding. Although it is funded internationally and by international bodies, there has been a lot of delays in Treasury in processing the dam, which will also produce power. But when you look at wind power and other sources of power, and even the proposed atomic energy in Kilifi, atomic energy, Mr. Speaker, is not in many parts of the world. There are quite a number of countries where it's been done. It's been successful, but it has its own dangers, and I'm aware that public participation with the locals is going on, and I don't think it really should be public participation with the locals, but public participation with the country, so that you know, everyone gets to know exactly what will be the pros and cons and what will be the dangers and the advantages, Mr. Speaker, so that we may have produce power in the country and then lower, you know, the cost of power, as it is one of the things which really inhibit development of a country. I've heard of agreements cast on stone. Mr. Speaker, I beg to disagree with the committee completely. There cannot be an agreement which is cast on stone in this country in relation to between one country, one state organ and another when it comes to the service of the people. The Constitution of Kenya is supreme, and some of these agreements, unless they are done by cartels or people want to hold the country hostage, this Senate has power to deal with those cartels and to call those agreements here, debate on them, even pass a law dealing with those agreements, and therefore the agreement that they are cast on stone cannot really be sustained. So I really want to urge the committee and the government to keenly look at the matter of the cost of electricity. I am very sure, Mr. Speaker, it can be considered, considering the El Nino rains and the power we are producing, considering the power we also buy from Uganda, which is also supplied in Kenya. I think there has been general disorganization of the whole power chain in this country. And it's a high time all those state organs and parastatals dealing with power realized that power was very important for the development of this country, for production of goods, for industrialization, for movement of goods. Now that we are talking of solar power, we are talking of cars and motorbikes, which are propelled by electricity, whereby they have got to be charged overnight and then used. And when you do the comparative study within the region, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Kenya, you've realized that our neighbors have cheaper electricity than ourselves. And even the power supply, Mr. Speaker, is not constant. A lot of times, people are forced, you know, to invest in generators. If you have a serious installation, like here in Parliament, we have a standby generator. That should never be the case. The power supply should be constant, consistent, and cheap enough so that it can be afforded by common Kenyans. Those who are using tokens or that system, it has become so expensive together with the taxes levied on power, such that Kenyans have really suffered. You know, some are unable to have power even when they have a supply. And then, Mr. Speaker, we don't have sufficient power supply in the country. We need to have the power lines running to every constituency in this country, running to every village in this country. This is part of beginning to industrialize the country. This is part of beginning to have self-employment in the country for those who do welding, for those who run the salons, and many other areas where power is required. So in my own opinion, although the committee has done very well, I think a lot more needed to be done to make sure that, Mr. Speaker, we have cheaper power in the country, to make proposals, strong proposals to the government to deal with those who are regulating and who keep on hiding the cost of power, and mainly the taxes, and just increasing the power to be much higher, and even without consulting anyone. You know, you just wake up and your electricity bill is doubled or tripled. Mr. Speaker, this has gone to the same argument of high cost of living. But if power bills were to be lowered, you will begin, cushioning Kenyans in terms of cost of living, and therefore I really want to urge the Senate and the government to take this matter seriously, consult the relevant authorities, and go on to lower the cost of living by lowering the cost of power. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't agree with this report totally. We need to go back again. We need to consider the whole policy and make sure that the power cost is lowered for Kenyans. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to debate this motion. At the very beginning, I want to state that I support this motion. Mr. Speaker, this inquiry was to lay bare to Kenyans why there is the high cost of electricity in this country. Mr. Speaker, the Energy Committee went out of its way to carry out this inquiry. And one of the things that Kenyans need to know, Mr. Speaker, is that at some point in this country, there were very shady agreements that were entered into that committed this country to long-term repayment period with the independent power producers. And the justification for the people who were sitting in government at that time was that it is better to have expensive agreements rather than not have power within Kenya. Mr. Speaker, Kenya Power and Lighting Corporation, Company Limited, was committed and saddled with very heavy burdens of debt and very long-term burdens of debt. And Mr. Speaker, when you look at some of the agreements when the inquiry was taking place, you can see a clear trend of officers within government whom you could see they were talking or having back agreements with those IPPs, Mr. Speaker, to the disadvantage of the Kenyan people. So Kenyans must know that the Senate Energy Committee has revealed in this report that in fact there were very unconscionable agreements that caused this country to pay heavily for electricity. And these are long-term agreements, Mr. Speaker, that have saddled us with heavy electricity charges. Mr. Speaker, these officers were in the Ministry of Energy, in the Ministry of Petroleum. They enjoyed their time there. They made those agreements, and some of them very bad, very unconscionable against the Kenyan people, and then nothing happened to them. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the recommendations of this report, if you look at the very end of it, it says that ethics and anti-corruption and DCI undertake investigations to establish the criminal liability of public officers involved in the irregular and unlawful behaviors. If you go all the way to recommendation 229, you will see, Mr. Speaker, that they were those who were mentioned even adversely in cases that went to court, like the ELC case of Meru, number 163 of 2014. Some of the parcels of land, Mr. Speaker, were also irregularly acquired. People sat in that government, Mr. Speaker. People made unconscionable decisions against the people of Kenya. People made millions, people made billions, and they walked away free. This report is trying to say, Mr. Speaker, that those former government officers who used to sit in the Ministry of Energy, they should not be left to go alone. And Mr. Speaker, we want this to be given serious priority, because right now, Mr. Speaker, if you look at recommendation number 224, the Kenya Power and Lighting Company Limited right now is saddled with a 38 billion debt burden. And Mr. Speaker, this comes from the type of agreements that were written in those days. So these public officers, maybe they collected 1 billion, maybe they collected 500 million, maybe they collected something, 200 million, 100 million, but a few years down the road, they have committed a public utility company to the tune of 38 billion debt, Mr. Speaker, that we as Kenyans must pay. So, Mr. Speaker, I simply have to agree very much with that recommendation. Mr. Speaker, my prayer is that the ministry, as we translate this to the anti-corruption and the DCI, they will go back, look at those ministers, look at those permanent secretaries, look at those CEOs of KPLC that were there in those days who committed these long-term agreements, Mr. Speaker, and they will do a thorough job so that Kenyans can, and possibly, Mr. Speaker, seize some of the properties so that we can start offsetting this debt by KPLC. Mr. Speaker, there is another thing that came out of this report, that the Ministry of Lands and county governments, they need to work out a way in which the parcels of land that have been given out for purposes of securing transmission lands, titles are given where it is necessary. Mr. Speaker, what has been happening is that the ministry incurs a lot of expenses through KETRACO. And then at the end of it, you will find that those expenses are not justified. Mr. Speaker, this report is coming down to the whole process of acquisition. There's a lot of darkness around how acquisition of land is done. And Mr. Speaker, this again speaks to the cost of electricity, because once payments are made, these payments have to be recovered from somewhere. And this reflects again in the bills that we have to pay so that we sustain the electricity that we consume. So, Mr. Speaker, we need also to look at proper, and this report recommends that proper procedures, standardized procedures be followed when monies are being paid, so that way-leaves are obtained when land is being taken for purposes of transmission. You will find, Mr. Speaker, in some places there is high exaggeration of these costs, and in some places there is hardly any payments that are given. Now, when there is high exaggeration, acquiring those way-leaves, Mr. Speaker, it translates again to the cost of per unit of electricity. And this report is saying that that must be streamlined. Mr. Speaker, we also have a big problem. KETRACO and Kenya Power and Lighting Company, they do two very different functions and roles. A lot of times, people, when we have blackouts, they say that it is Kenya Power and Lighting Company Limited. But when you look critically, for those of us who are a bit knowledgeable on the energy sector, you know that Kenya has a very unstable system for power transmission. Mr. Speaker, time has come that there must be deliberate investment. And this report says that we need to invest in transmission so that we stabilize the system. Without stabilization of the system of transmission, Mr. Speaker, we will continue having blackouts. And Kenyans, the Senate of this republic has identified in this report that there's need to rehabilitate some of the transmission lines. Mr. Speaker, when you look at recommendation number 209, that this Senate is directing that KETRACO must set aside a percentage of their budget for purposes of rehabilitation and maintenance of all transmission lines. Mr. Speaker, it is the only way that we can truly and honestly deal with the problems of blackouts. Because for as long as the system of transmission is unstable, we will continue having blackouts. Mr. Speaker, there are 4 areas that need urgent attention as far as stabilization of this transmission system in Kenya is concerned. Mr. Speaker, I will mention maybe 2. There is need, Mr. Speaker, and this report recommends that the proposed 400/220 kV Mariakani substation should be completed within a period of 3 months, which will allow for Suswa to Mariakani through Isinya to be energized and therefore allow more geothermal power to be generated and to flow to Mombasa. Mr. Speaker, Mombasa is a very important town and it has its own fair share of its blackouts. But Mr. Speaker, most Kenyans and the people of Mombasa may not know it is because of lack of completion for this Suswa-Isinya line. And Mr. Speaker, the problem is traced again to the lack of stability in the generation of power, the transmission of power. So, Mr. Speaker, this report has given at least 4 major lines that need to be finished so that we can have stability in terms of the transmission. Sometimes we make noise at Kenya Power and Lighting Company, but in fact, the problem is KETRACO. Because for as long as the transmission system is unstable, we will continue having these problems, and we will continue having unstable supply of electricity. So, Mr. Speaker, it may cost this country a lot to stabilize, but in the final end, that is the investment that is required now is the one that will stabilize the transmission, and it will help to reduce the cost of power eventually. Mr. Speaker, there's something that we need to say in this Senate. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, it is important for this Senate to note that the 4th schedule, in fact, maybe I may want to read it, it states that county planning and development, including electricity and gas reticulation and energy regulation, is supposed to be, according to the Constitution, a county function. This is not supposed to be a function of the national government. This is supposed to be a function of the counties. So going forward, honorable senators, it is time for us to think how we can take back the power of gas and energy reticulation, the power of energy regulation with these countries to the counties, Mr. Speaker. This is what the Constitution says. But what do we have? 14 years after the passing of the Constitution, we are still having the same setup. We have KETRACO, we have KPLC, we have other energy setups within the country that are not compliant with the Constitution. We must find a way in which this role can be played effectively by the counties so that, Mr. Speaker, counties such as Tana River, which have not been properly covered. Mr. Speaker, you will find it is only in the town areas, not inside, not in the hinterland, that you will find electricity. Mr. Speaker, counties that are far-flung in these countries have not been energized, have not been given power, because this role that was supposed to be for counties is not being managed by counties. And I want to use the floor of this House to ask the Ministry of Energy to really find a way to transfer this function back to the counties in an effective way and efficient way, so that counties who carry the most population, Mr. Speaker, the most disadvantaged population, can also be able to access electricity. So, Mr. Speaker, with those many words, I want to support this energy report. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Ledama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this report. As I support this report, because I serve in the Energy Committee, I want to focus heavily on the recommendation that our committee gave. Mr. Speaker, you will note that, and I want to plead with my colleagues to take some time and actually read this report. Because once you read this report, you will realize that the Senate Energy Committee concentrated in trying to find solutions to the problems that we have in terms of the cost of energy. Mr. Speaker, if we sit here and argue and discuss and try to find out why electricity is so expensive in this country, which is making everything else so expensive, without focusing on the specific recommendations that are time-bound, Mr. Speaker, we will not be able to achieve anything. One of the recommendations, Mr. Speaker, that we gave has got to do with the restructuring of the debt owed by Kenya Power and Lighting to local financial institutions. Mr. Speaker, Kenya Power and Lighting borrowed in US dollars. They were getting the loans at a rate of about 6% plus liable. So when you do the calculation, it will bring to about 7.5%. With inflation, that is almost 10%. In US dollars. You've seen the way the US dollars have been dancing around. All that cost is transferred back to citizens of this republic. Mr. Speaker, the committee proposed a timeline in terms of what ought to be done to be able to address that issue of the debt of the 38 billion shillings that Kenya Power and Lighting owes to local financial institutions that loaned that money in US currency. The 38 billion can only reduce if Kenya Power and Lighting consider converting that loan from the commercial banks to now these other international loans that they normally borrow. Mr. Speaker, the cost of electricity is as a result of the contracts that were signed. And I had my brother, the good lawyer from Makueni, arguing that those contracts are not set in stone. But, Mr. Speaker, we understand contracts. If one party refuses to amend a contract, it involves litigation. For you to be able to go and argue, I do not believe that this House has got the power to now come in and pass a legislation to come in and amend a contract. What we ought to do, Mr. Speaker, is to look at the terms of those IPPs. Because what is making electricity expensive, and I thank the chairperson for literally highlighting it in his moving notes, is the cost of the thermal energy, Mr. Speaker. If you look at the amount of power that we produce with thermal energy in this country is 12.5%. But that is the most expensive. And that is why in the Energy Committee we recommended that we focus heavily on geothermal. If we focus on geothermal, we'll be able to reduce the cost of electricity. Mr. Speaker, the other part that I hope that we can be able to focus on is mostly investing heavily in renewable energy, focusing not only on geothermal, but also on solar energy. Currently, Mr. Speaker, with the current statistics that we have, we are only producing about 3% in solar energy. If we have farms in this country or industrial plants that produce a lot of their products during the day, why not think of trying to invest heavily in solar energy? Mr. Speaker, if you go through the recommendations, there are recommendations that have got timelines of about 60 days. And the biggest challenge we have, Mr. Speaker, is that we do not have an implementation committee. I hope that the clerk this time around will be able to, of course, continue doing the good job that they do, but also find a mechanism whereby the Energy Committee can report to this House on a self-implementation mechanism on what happens to these recommendations. One recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is on KETRACO setting up a budget to be able to improve their transmission lines. What makes electricity expensive, Mr. Speaker, sir, in this country, is dilapidated electricity lines. If you have electricity lines which are dilapidated, of course the cost of power will go high. Currently, Mr. Speaker, last week I brought in a statement here focusing on the issue of Narok County. If you go to Narok County as an example, you will find that rural electrification, or REA, has invested a lot of money in trying to finish the last mile connectivity, but those transmission lines have never been completed. In one area, you'll find either faulty transmitters. The other area, you'll find a lot of electric poles lying with cables, in fact, even becoming dangerous to the community. So, Mr. Speaker, this recommendation that we've given are very, very important. I don't know whether we'll be able to force the IPPs to be able to lower the cost of the electricity that they sell to Kenya Power and Lighting. I think what we need to do is to bring them on the table, negotiate, mediate, and find a way to reduce the cost. There's one recommendation, Mr. Speaker, which we will need a lot of support from the Turkana and Marsabit counties. This is the issue of the land, which has got the largest solar wind power in Africa, where the Lake Turkana wind power. I know in the committee, we made recommendations that DCI investigate. What mechanism, Mr. Speaker, do we have to ensure that we can finally report to this House to ensure that that issue of that land has been resolved? Mr. Speaker, these thermal plants use a lot of oil. One recommendation that we gave, which I hope that the ministry will pursue, is to ensure that the oil which is bought, the HFO oil, is something which, whatever cost they produce, whatever cost they use in terms of buying it, it can be able to help reduce the cost of electricity. Because if it is bought, together, it will still be very expensive for electricity. Mr. Speaker, it is imperative that if you read recommendation number that gives about 60 days, I think it is recommendation, let me look at the recommendation here. The recommendation given for Kenya Power and Lighting to publish the owners of all the IPPs, it is given 60 days. Those 60 days, if we do not follow through, there is no way that we can be able to get that information so that we can bring these people on the table, negotiate with them to lower the cost of electricity. One of the things that we have to find a way to deal with, Mr. Speaker, is, of course, the cost which is being passed on to consumers. When a power line is not working, it is not only the issue of KETRACO, and this is why I differed with my committee a little bit, it is not only KETRACO to be able to fix their transmission line, but also Kenya Power and Lighting, but also REA. We have to find a way where we sit down with the ministry, discuss with the ministry on how to bring all these parties on board so that if there is a line that has been built by REA, before that electricity has been transferred to Kenya Power and Lighting for them now to start charging, there is a mechanism of understanding at what point was that line functional and at what point was that line not functional. Because currently, Mr. Speaker, if you call REA, REA will tell you, we handed over this. But if you demand to be given information on when they handed it over to Kenya Power, it becomes what in Swahili we call kizungumkuti. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe we have an opportunity. And I want to encourage my colleagues. In fact, even if you've not read the report on all the work that the Energy Committee did, just focus solely on the recommendations. If you focus on the recommendations, you will be able to understand. These are things that we deal with on a daily basis. There's absolutely no reason as to why Kilgoris and Emurue Dikir would not have electricity for 24 hours and no one worries about it. There's no reason as to why when you come to Narok North, there's no electricity for 3 or 4 days and nobody cares about it. We have a lot of schools, Mr. Speaker. We have a lot of healthcare facilities in this country that have got no power. And the only way that we'll be able to get power to them is if we all work together to reduce the cost of electricity so that Kenya Power can then get some money to extend electricity to other parts which are dark. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate that it now behooves all of us, not only the Energy Committee, but all the 47 elected senators, to look at this report, to try and understand where it affects their own counties. And then from there, let us now begin lobbying. In most cases, you'll find that members of the National Assembly are the ones who lobby. They are the ones who have got a budget. They are the ones who will go to REA. They are the ones who will go to the ministry. I think it is now a national duty, and it behooves all of us as senators also to be mindful of our own entire county. Because you will find that in a county like Narok, for instance, we have 6 constituencies. In those 6 constituencies, Narok East has the highest connectivity. Why? Because the Member of Parliament from Narok East, the Honorable Ken Aramat, is a member of the Energy Committee in the National Assembly. So he's aware. He's able to move around, lobby for electricity to be connected. But if you go to Emurue Dikir, the Member of Parliament from that constituency has only managed to connect the constituency with 20% of electricity. So you'll find like about 67 schools have got no power. Health facilities have got no power. So, Mr. Speaker, I think now, as senators, we now need to go beyond the call of duty. We now need to ask ourselves, what will Kenya look like when everywhere is connected with electricity? These reports normally come, we do a very good job, we spend a lot of taxpayers' money, but if we don't follow through, Mr. Speaker, the reports end up just collecting dust. You know, you ask yourself, so what did you do? I know tomorrow, on Thursday, the Energy Committee is going to Kilifi to deal with this issue of nuclear power, you know, to discuss with the residents of that area. If we cannot solve a problem of making sure that at least power is there, renewable energy is there, are we going to be able to deal with the issue of nuclear energy, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I want to end by saying, reiterating again, on the importance of this report. Let us not waste time reading too much of it. Go straight to the 2 pages. And when you make your contribution here, I want to beseech you, my brothers and sisters, let us find a way that we can be able to take this ministry to task. Those who sign deals, which are very expensive, Mr. Speaker, with the IPPs, I agree with the report that they should be taken to task. We have to find a way. You know, nothing surprises me nowadays, Mr. Speaker, with this government. This government can be able to turn stones into bread. So if we can be able to change and negotiate whichever means possible for the cost of the IPPs to go down, more power to us. I'll be happy when Kenya Power and Lighting, with the Ministry of Energy, also focuses on completing the Narok line. You know, in most cases, Mr. Speaker, I live in Narok, of course, but in most cases, we resort to using gensets and solar because that line is not stable. It is one of the recommendations that if we complete that line, we also complete Suswa, you know, we will have solutions for the entire country. I'm happy that we are now thinking of Mombasa at a time when Mombasa will now be also benefiting from the Suswa line and not only on thermal plants. The cost of electricity is high because we are not concentrating on what needs to be concentrated. Fuel prices are very high, you know, and all that is passed on. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I insist that the Auditor General must audit the loans, particularly the loans which were taken from Equity Bank, taken from Stanbic, taken from all this in US currency. The terms of those loans must be made public, because you cannot take a loan at 6% plus liable. It makes it very expensive. With the current loans, unless we are trading in dollars in this country, if you convert Kenya shillings into US dollars and then you pay that loan, you realize that every single day, if you are paying 3,000 shillings a month for your electricity, you will now be paying 30,000 shillings for us to be able to manage to service those debts. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Aaron Cheriot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this report by our members of the Standing Committee on Energy, a very important topic which I must admit this committee has attempted to handle a very difficult task ahead of them. Conclusively in some areas, and in some of the issues that have been raised, they could do better. But nonetheless, job worth commending. So I commend the Energy Committee, led by Senator Matinga, and the entire team that worked on this report, sat down, listened to all the stakeholders that they have listed for us, and the various energy, either the regulatory authority, the players, IPPs, KenGen, and all these players in the energy sector, Mr. Speaker, because you'd appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that power and the conversation on the cost of it is one sticky issue that as a country we've gone around for many, many years and unfortunately haven't been able to resolve. In my earlier years in this House, Mr. Speaker, I served in the Energy Committee, and on many occasions we had conversations around many of these topics, and I must commend this committee, Mr. Speaker, despite the limited powers of the Senate in some of the issues that they are attempting to resolve, Mr. Speaker, they have taken very bold decisions, and they have guided the House in very bold, even bolder proposals, which I want to believe, Mr. Speaker, if properly implemented, can help reduce the cost of energy. Kenya, Mr. Speaker, continues to face challenges of being globally competitive and in its attempt to industrialize on account of many issues. But top on the list, Mr. Speaker, if you ask me, is the cost of power and how this affects manufacturing, Mr. Speaker. One of the reasons why many institutions do struggle to set up here locally, Mr. Speaker, is because of the cost of power. I must appreciate, though, that with the coming into place of this administration and the gazetting of certain special economic zones, like what was launched previously under the Green Energy Initiative in Naivasha, Mr. Speaker, companies will begin to troop in. But then, Mr. Speaker, this conversation of energy is not just about attracting investors into the country. It is also about us, the ordinary people, and citizens who just want to use electricity to shower, to iron, and do basic things, because it affects the ordinary mwananchi and the people that we represent in this House, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I appreciate that that is a reason, and I want to believe that's the basis upon which this committee has focused specifically on KPLC, Mr. Speaker, and as an enabler, and also as one of the institutions which is properly reformed, Mr. Speaker, can bring down the cost of power. There's a point of departure that I hold with many of the members of this House, Mr. Speaker. I don't agree with the insistence of the formation of an implementation committee. And this report is one such example, Mr. Speaker, why you cannot have an implementation committee. Mr. Speaker, you cannot have a committee like the Standing Committee of Energy. Listen to all those presentations on very technical issues. You know, do a report that has very far-reaching implications, such as what has been proposed here, Mr. Speaker. Then you tell them that you give the same report to a particular group of people, just senators like us, Mr. Speaker, and expect that they will have the same depth of understanding as you, the primary committee, that sat down and understood those issues. It is on that very point, Mr. Speaker, that I have continued to be opposed to the formation of an implementation committee, Mr. Speaker. I strongly agree with the view of those who argue alongside me that the best place committee to handle the work of any nature in this House, Mr. Speaker, is a line committee of that particular sector, Mr. Speaker. In these particular issues, on issues of energy, there is no way you can form another committee, Mr. Speaker, and expect them to be adept at the issues that are being raised, HFO generators, blah, 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 this IPP, terminate with the other country, and expect that they will have the understanding to follow up with the same zeal and energy as members of our committee. And the same can be said of all other issues and all other sectors, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, on that particular issue, I just felt that I should make a comment because I've had many of our colleagues speak to this issue in their contribution before getting to the general recommendations of the report, Mr. Speaker, ask us, so what is going to happen now? Who is going to follow to ensure that, for example, recommendation 206, that within 14 days after the adoption by the Senate, the Ministry of Energy should disclose the full identities, beneficial owners of the IPPs, including companies listed as shareholders in foreign jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker. You know, it is upon the Energy Committee to sit 2 weeks after we have passed this report today and ask of the same, demand from Ministry of Energy that the Senate made a resolution. Resolutions of the House are not suggestions. They are binding and they have legal implications, Mr. Speaker. I expect that when Senator Matinga sits with his committee 2 weeks after the passage of this report, they will be demanding answers from Ministry of Energy, because Ministry of Energy will be sufficiently supplied with this report and all that has been said, whatever is expected of them. The same can be said of Ketraco, can be said of Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Power, EPRA, and all these institutions that they have instructed to do this or the other thing, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it is important that they, as a committee, carry their baby into maturity, Mr. Speaker. The second recommendation, which I want to agree with them, Mr. Speaker, is on this issue of thermal power plants, Mr. Speaker. Many times, those of us that have followed this conversation, each minister has come before this House and informed us of the cost. I think it goes to about 0.45 cents of a dollar, Mr. Speaker, to produce a kilowatt hour, you know, and something close to that. I don't want to be specific about it because I don't have the figures off the top of my mind, Mr. Speaker. But it's about 2 times what it costs to produce on hydro, and perhaps even 3 or 4 times what it costs to produce, Mr. Speaker, on other cheaper means, Mr. Speaker, like the geothermal. Why we continue and why we are bound by contracts that are completely lopsided and only favor the so-called investors, Mr. Speaker, in this area, is something that as a House we need to resolve. I had expected that this committee will guide us. This committee boasts of very senior lawyers, including even the assistants of the legal team of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. I had expected, it was my anticipation, that they will guide the country through this Parliament to tell us what are we going to do with this particular contract, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, that we are helpless the way this report would wish to suggest in that particular regard, Mr. Speaker. Surely, there is something that the people of Kenya can do. If you have a contract that, Mr. Speaker, makes it so expensive for the ordinary citizen and ordinary people of Kenya to access power, you want to tell me this contract, Mr. Speaker, has no exit clauses? I thought every contract has conditions, Mr. Speaker, that if you feel it's no longer tenable or favorable to you, upon certain notices and such things, Mr. Speaker, there should be ways and means of exiting. The same can be calculated. Government should be able to bear the cost, or those that signed on these agreements, Mr. Speaker. But to pass the same cost, Mr. Speaker, to the ordinary citizens and the people, the poor people that we represent in this House, Mr. Speaker, is completely unfair. And I believe on that regard, the committee needs to do better and must guide the House in unraveling that mystery, Mr. Speaker. Recommendation 208 points out to certain specific lines that needs to be completed, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't have part of these lines. The reason we keep on mentioning them, Mr. Speaker, is because on account of them, we are told actually the 2 times that we've had the national blackout, Mr. Speaker, is on overload on some of those lines. And if we had these lines having been completed, Mr. Speaker, we wouldn't be where we are today. The Takwel Ortum Kitale line, the very famous Narok Bomet line, Mr. Speaker. You know, there are certain sections of this country, Mr. Speaker, that though it may not be admitted publicly, load shedding actually happens unofficially, Mr. Speaker. That in certain times, peak times of the day, Mr. Speaker, you just find power disappearing. Of course, because some of those citizens may not be as noisy as others in certain quarters of the country, Mr. Speaker, may not have the access to social media and all these things. People don't notice. But there are parts of this country that are persistently in darkness, Mr. Speaker, on many afternoons and certain days of the week. Mr. Speaker, Ketraco also has been fingered and pointed out to be responsible for some of these challenges, especially on the issue of maintenance of certain old lines. which contribute to these either blackouts or make it so expensive to evacuate power, Mr. Speaker. And I've been asked to come up with a better plan of rehabilitating and maintaining these particular lines, Mr. Speaker. There was a Gazette notice on the 21st of December 2029, Mr. Speaker, where Ketraco was to be designated as a system operator within 31 days, Mr. Speaker. That needs to happen as soon as possible, Mr. Speaker, so that we can conclude on that particular issue. That all thermal plants, still again back to this issue of thermal plants, recommendation number 215, Mr. Speaker, should install flow meters to monitor and consumption of HFO and report to the Senate the progress within 60 days, Mr. Speaker, so that you are able to tell, Mr. Speaker, whether this claim that the owners of these thermal plants continue to make of how many liters, Mr. Speaker, and all that, the cost of maintaining those thermal plants is genuine or not, Mr. Speaker, can only be found if we have a scientific way of measuring. And I expect that the Energy Committee, Mr. Speaker, and its members that are part and parcel of this House shall feed us this report within 60 days as they have recommended in this report. Recommendation 217 on a 30 days notice of intention to terminate PPA with a particular company, Mr. Speaker, Africa Geothermal International Limited, due to inactivity on the allocated area, and report to the Senate within 45 days of the adoption of report. Part again of the capture of our energy sector, Mr. Speaker, that has happened in the last few decades, Mr. Speaker, where people walk in, but they are just briefcase companies, Mr. Speaker. They are given either exploration licenses for geothermal or are asked to set up solar plant. 5-10 years down the line, you find that there hasn't been any activity. I want to appreciate the industry of the committee in pointing out this particular contractor, Mr. Speaker. If they were handed over a site and many years down the line, they have never been able to do a single activity, Mr. Speaker, what is the ministry still waiting for? I'm sure if the same had been given to a competent and a genuine business entity, Mr. Speaker, and not brokers such as this, Mr. Speaker, they will already have brought the power to line. We wouldn't today be relying on Ethiopia and Uganda importing power, Mr. Speaker. It is on account of such briefcase companies, Mr. Speaker, that we continue to have reliance of power on other countries, Mr. Speaker. Will you imagine for a second, Mr. Speaker, if today we had a local or domestic issues, and they want to put it, Mr. Speaker, within the East African region, and some of our neighbors denied us power, Mr. Speaker? Do you know the kind of economic crisis that we'll find ourselves in? This is an issue of even national security. The same should be discussed, and I don't know how the good and very sharp members of the Energy Committee missed out on companies that also have been awarded geothermal exploration licenses. And for more than 20 years, for some of them, Mr. Speaker, they haven't been able to move a spoon of soil, Mr. Speaker, and they continue to hold those licenses in various capitals of the world, pretending as if they're investors. Those are the people that are making us as a country energy insecure, Mr. Speaker. And I expect that the Departmental Committee on Energy will crack hard on such institutions, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, is on the issue of whaling. You do know how difficult it was, Mr. Speaker, and how expensive it was to evacuate power from Loyangalani to Suswa on account of this particular issue alone. We live, Mr. Speaker, and you understand this country. We are all Kenyans and we know ourselves how we behave many times, Mr. Speaker. Today, engineers design a particular power line going, say, to Vihiga or Busia, where Senator Umtata comes. Before you know it, before even those programs leave the Ministry of Energy, people have bought land along that particular line, Mr. Speaker, and they want to sell it to government so exorbitantly. It was on that account, Mr. Speaker, that we passed the land valuation bill in this House in 2018. And therefore, I believe those speculators have little business to do. But still, nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, there are people who continue to frustrate public interest projects, Mr. Speaker, on account of this particular point that has been raised. And therefore, NLC, Ministry of Energy, and county governments and other relevant stakeholders must come up with guidelines that will cost the acquisition of whale leaves with the aim of reducing these particular challenges, Mr. Speaker, because that is an alive issue, Mr. Speaker. We know many people that built even huts that are just made of grass-thatch houses and little huts, Mr. Speaker, but we're charging government, and there's nothing called government. It's us, it's me, you, and the people that we represent in this House, Mr. Speaker, more than 5 million to put up or to get them off the whale leaves, Mr. Speaker. Corruption of the highest order. And therefore, I expect that these particular regulations will form part and parcel of the regulations that will be passed alongside the 27 pending regulations by EPRA. in accordance to the bill, the energy bill that we passed here in 2019, which up to date, Mr. Speaker, EPRA has unfortunately not been able to pass those recommendations. Curiously though, colleagues in the departmental committee, you never gave EPRA a time period within which to pass these regulations. I expected that because this is a law that we passed more than 5 years ago in this House, Mr. Speaker, and we participated and had long debates with them. I served in the Energy Committee at that particular time, Mr. Speaker, and we had a lot of time with all these stakeholders. I expected that the committee will give EPRA a time period, a time frame within which to gazette those 27 recommendations. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that even after the passage of this report and as you exit this recommendation and ask the various state actors to ensure that they do that which they need to do so that ordinary Kenyans can enjoy the economies of scale, you will ask EPRA to do the same expeditiously, much as you haven't asked of them within a particular period of time. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there's mention of EACC and DCI to check and look into how some of these contracts were entered into. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how much progress we'll make into that. If we haven't been able to do it the last 10 or 20 years, I don't know. But I'm still optimistic, and our colleagues will be able to follow up and tell us if they are successful at it, so that people can be diligent. When you are a holder of a public office, Mr. Speaker, particularly those who enter into contracts on behalf of the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, need to know and be aware, Mr. Speaker, that they act on behalf of all of us. And should you be careless, you should be judged, Mr. Speaker, for the relation of duty and putting Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, in way of loss, which is something that should be charged, and people need to be punished so that they are careful next time. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support and congratulate members of the Energy Committee for this well-done report and suggest that they carry on board the improvements that I have made, as long as the suggestions that have been given by other members. With all those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support. I thank you.
Senator Enoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, let me join my colleagues who have spoken before me in congratulating the Standing Committee on Energy, led by my friend, my brother, Senator Matinga, on coming up with a fairly comprehensive report on the inquiry into the high cost of electricity in the country. As Speaker, I will make very brief and targeted remarks on this report, as I declare from the onset that I do support the report. The Speaker, my first comment is on the recommendations of the committee, recommendation number 1, listed as 206, that within 14 days after adoption by the Senate, the Ministry of Energy should disclose the full identities, beneficial owners of IPPs, including companies listed as shareholders. Mr. Speaker, it is okay to make a disclosure on the people that own these IPPs, the companies that own these IPPs. But, Mr. Speaker, that disclosure on its own does not help a lot in bringing down the cost of electricity. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter whether it is Mr. X or Company Y that owns an IPP, if the final cost of the product is beyond the reach of the consumers. As Speaker, I was perusing through the report, and there's a recommendation in the report that says that KPLC should get into agreements with IPPs that are able to give fair pricing of their products when certain thresholds are met. The Speaker, my view on IPPs, and I know this is the view of a lot of people, is in fact we should be looking for a way of terminating all deals with all IPPs. The Speaker, it should never be lost on us that Kenya Power is perhaps, apart from Kenya Airways maybe, but Kenya Power is perhaps the only existing mega monopoly in this country, producing power to every consumer of electricity in every corner of this country. Why Kenya Power gets into losses, Mr. Speaker? Why Kenya Power is unable to produce enough when they are doing it on their own without competition, the Speaker, is something you really can never understand. And so instead of getting into deals with IPPs, can Kenya Power invest in efficiency? The Speaker, it's almost laughable for us as a nation to be talking about venturing into nuclear energy, a delicate but clean energy. If we are unable to handle the traditional ways of producing electricity for our people, how can we even dream of going the nuclear way? So, the Speaker, on that issue of disclosure, yes, it's okay to do the disclosure, but disclosure for what? The Speaker, let's disclose, but let us begin a process of terminating contracts with IPPs. And if the Speaker, then it becomes evident that Kenya Power cannot be profitable, then we kill the monopoly and we register competition. We register other people, other companies, other entities to produce electricity for the country. The Speaker, it will also be remembered that this conversation around Kenya Power and their ability or inability to produce electricity for affordable electricity for consumers in this country. The Speaker, in Article 204 of our Constitution, that establishes the Equalization Fund. The drafters of our Constitution have realized that access to affordable electricity is a basic requirement for development. And in it, they are saying that the Equalization Fund should go into basic services, including electricity, roads, water, and health. So central, Mr. Speaker, is electricity to the development of any area in this country that, Mr. Speaker, it should bother us as a House that today we are discussing lack of access to affordable electricity when we have a monopoly that has been operating for so long. The Speaker, on my last contribution, still on the recommendation by the committee, and I want Senator Matinga to hear this. I see Senator Veronica is distracting Senator Matinga. The Speaker, there's a recommendation, Senator Matinga, in 226, where you're saying, where applicable, KPLC should utilize restricted tendering. I oppose that recommendation for a reason. The Speaker, the reason why we do open tendering, and we should encourage open tendering for almost the procurement of every public good, is so that people can get value for money. Now, when you start talking about restricted tendering for KPLC, which is already enjoying a monopoly, then you are compromising the principle of value for money. And I would say, instead of pushing for restricted tendering for KPLC, why can't you again push for investment in efficiency within KPLC and all the departments? So, Mr. Speaker, we don't have a situation where we procure over 4,000 transformers and almost all of them at connection blow up. Mr. Speaker, the issue of procurement, and especially the procurement of transformers within KPLC, is a matter that I really would have wanted to see direct recommendations on this report. Because, Mr. Speaker, this country has been treated to a lot of games when it comes to the procurement of transformers within the bigger body of KPLC, whether it's like a truck or relic or whoever it is that is procuring these transformers. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I am in support generally of the report.